Hello again, everybody. Welcome. A new edition of Sev Geff Live. Paul Severino with you here. Glenn Geffner on the other side. Geff, it's good to see you again, buddy. It's been about a week and a half. We've had some things going on in our own lives. We thought we'd never be busy again, but it turns out this week we've been a little bit busy. So it's good to be back with you again, pal. How are you?
I'm doing well, and it's good that in the last week or so since we last got together, you've started to see some movement, and you start to feel like maybe baseball's getting a little bit closer with the owners agreeing to a plan, and now they got to sit down with the players and hammer out some details. But for the first time since this began, and it's now been more than 2 months since we left Jupiter, it's like half an off season.
Yeah.
More than 2 months since we left Jupiter. For the first time, you start to feel, though, like the wheels are turning, and hopefully we can get back out to the ballpark before too long.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, you want to take an optimistic view that we'll see some form of baseball. Of course, safety is paramount to this whole thing. I know a lot of people are chatting about money and who's saving money, who's losing money, this whole thing.
But it all begins with the medical stuff.
Right.
No
it's all of that, and hopefully, again, it can get worked out. I know we all miss baseball. There's a lot of people that I know are not thought of when it comes to it. A lot of people think it's the owners and it's the players, but it's the umpires, it's ballpark operators, it's some broadcasters, right, that are also financially affected here too. So there's a lot up in the air that we're all hoping that it comes back at the right time and in the right way, so that once it starts, it can then finish and we can get going with the 2020 season in whatever form that becomes. We have James Rowson joining us in just a couple of moments here. Of course, the new bench coach with the Marlins. He was the hitting coach with the Twins last year, who hit just shy of
What did they do?
They hit just shy of 1,000 home runs, Geff, and with home runs.
About half of Marlins Park over 3 months.
That's right. Maybe that'll come up during our conversation today. But speaking of home runs, we've, of course, got the Home Run Rewards program that we want to tell you about as well. You can unlock new prizes and experience throughout May if you enter the bonus code NEWS, N-E-W-S. You can earn extra rewards points today. So you visit marlins.com/rewards for more updates. All right, a little thing that we just talked about was the possibility of a season, Geff. That is where your question of the day comes into play.
I tweeted this out. We've got a poll for you. You can go to my Twitter, @Glenn Geffner, if you'd like to cast your vote. Let's say, in a perfect world, your team wins the 2020 World Series, an 82-game regular season, which is what they're talking about, an expanded playoff. How do you feel about that? I gave you 3 options to vote. Number 1, my life is complete. It's like when the Red Sox won in 2004, when the Cubs won in 2016, I can die happy now. My team won the World Series. What about maybe I'm fired up, but with an asterisk? It wasn't 162. It's a little bit of a different year. And my third option was wake me up in 2021. I couldn't care less. And and the majority of people have said my life is complete. They're looking at this like any other season, and maybe they should. 54% at the moment say my life is complete if my team wins the World Series this year. Fired up with an asterisk at 30% right now. Wake me up in 2021 is at 16%. So That's the voting. If you'd like to cast your ballot, go to my Twitter feed, @Glenn Geffner.
All right. I have a feeling that I know where our guest is going to fall on that particular one right there. James Rowson joins us right now. James, thanks again for taking the time to join us today. We're looking forward to this. One of the many new faces around the Marlins organization for 2020 and hopefully beyond as well. This is so easy. This is such a layup. You better get this one right. If the Marlins win the World Series this season, which one would you vote for? Are you fired up? It's got an asterisk, or you just wait until next year?
Oh, we're fired up. Believe that. we are absolutely fired up for that. That's what we're looking forward to.
Good. All the questions will be that easy today, by the way. We appreciate, again, that you're joining us. You are in Florida right now. It's kind of where you call home. So what have you been up to these last couple of months with all this extra free time?
Oh, well, first, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate you guys having me on. Glad to be here. I've been kind of doing like everybody else. I mean, just trying to take the pulse of everything. Obviously, first and foremost, what's happening in the world and what's happening in the country. And just obviously, there's a big health crisis going on right now. And people are worried about their health and worried about other things in life. So it kind of puts baseball in perspective a little bit for the time being. But at the same time, our game has always been pretty cool at bringing people back together. And there are a lot of people out there that would love to see baseball get started again. So in the meantime, we've been doing some things, trying to pass the time away by just having some Zoom meetings, talking to some players, talking to some staff, And in the last couple of weeks here, starting to get excited about the possibility of returning.
Spring training is such an important time of year for every team, for every player, for every coach annually. But for you, coming into a brand new organization this year where you're getting to know everybody, and I know relationships are a huge part of what you do particularly, what's it like getting through a month and then having everything shut down and now looking at a spring training 2.0 at some point? But how much does that set you back?
It was tough because spring training was really going so well, to be honest with you. Building those relationships was fun. It was a big part of the process for me, starting to get to know people and more importantly, those guys starting to get to know me a little bit too and how we're going to do some things. But, we started and then the stop was kind of abrupt and it was shocking for everybody really because we all didn't expect it and didn't know what to expect as far as the time length and how long it was going to take and those type of things. But to be honest with you, there have also been some positives in the sense that during this downtime, I've gotten a chance to, now that I've been able to put, faces with ability and watching these guys play live and do some things, now to go back and look at some video of what was going on. I think I have a better grip on the players themselves. It's one thing to look at them in the off season without really knowing them, but now having a chance to have gone through spring training, get to know guys, get to talk to guys, know their personalities, and kind of continue those relationships. I feel like it's we got a chance to really hit the ground running once we get started again.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that you're too humble to like this nickname, but when a team that you're basically at the helm of as the hitting coach hits a major league record in home runs, you're a mad scientist, right? Like you've got this thing on lockdown. So now with exactly that, this extra time, have you been able to, we'll talk about individual players and specific players in just a bit, but do you think you maybe have been able to unlock some things in this added video session, this extra time that you've had to maybe help this club in ways that the Marlins certainly hoped that you would when they brought you on board?
Yeah, absolutely. But for what you said at the beginning, I would always say, good players, you need good players to hit home runs, and you need good players to do those things. So I've been blessed and been fortunate to be around good players. And that was one of the most exciting things, honestly, to take a chance to come into this group and joining this group of guys is I was looking at the talent level, get a chance to look at the players that we have. And again, like you said, we could talk through some of them individually, but there's a lot of talented players that have a lot of ability on this team. And I was not disappointed at all when I came to spring training and got to see what that looked like live. Matter of fact, I was even more excited after getting a chance to see these guys in spring training and what they can do. But in order to do that, the first part I always talk about this initially is just, when you look at these guys as a whole, you're trying to find out what their strengths are and what they do best. And you want to keep those guys in that realm. Learning themselves, being the best version of themselves is the most important part of it. I think when you're growing into being a major league player and you're growing in to try to be a productive major league player, there are guys that can do so many things, and you're trying to find what you can do consistently most often. And that's what I would like to help a lot of players to do along the way, just assist them and help answer some questions that they have, but also get them a little bit more acclimated with the things that they do best, most consistently, and try and be the best versions of themselves and not try to do more than what they're capable of doing. Because usually when you get to that level, what you're capable of doing is enough.
So it's easy to ask you what your hitting philosophy is, but I guess from what you're saying, part of the answer is your philosophy is different for Brian Anderson than it is for Miguel Rojas or for Jorge Alfaro or for Lewis Brinson.
Absolutely. You hear it all the time in the game. You hear like where people say, players have to make adjustments, and you always hear like you have to make adjustments in this game, or this game is a game of adjustments. From a coaching standpoint, that's how I see it. I see if you ask players to make adjustments, coaches have to make adjustments too. And what you're doing is you're adjusting to each individual. We're all not the same. We all don't tick the same. We're all motivated differently, and we all have a different set of skills. And I think, in this game, what you're trying to do is get guys to identify with themselves as best as they can. What do I do best, and not try and do what the other player does best. Brian Anderson's going to have, a set of skills that Miggy Rojas is not going to have. And at the same time, Miggy Rojas is going to be able to do some things that Brian Anderson can't do. The job of us as an entire coaching staff is to get those guys to maximize their individual skills and put that together. And that makes the Miami Marlins the best team. And that's what we're going for. When we look at this, we're looking at runs scored offensively. That's what makes things happen. You want to be the team that scores the most runs. If we score more runs than you score, we're going to win a lot of games. And everything is based around each guy's individual ability to put us up in the run scored column.
I know that when press releases came out and articles came out and the first meeting with the media and all that other stuff, there was the football phrase, basically, offensive coordinator. Your official title, of course, is bench coach, but a tremendous hitting background as well. So in your kind of day-to-day responsibilities once the games start again, what is it? A traditional bench coach role? Make sure that we've got the right reliever up, or if we're going to make a double switch, here's how we're going to do it and be Donnie's right-hand man. And how much of that is paired with the hitting philosophy, hitting coordinator sort of stuff? Of course, working with Eric Duncan as well.
Yeah, obviously it's a unique situation. It's something that's that it was really interesting to me as we talked through this in the beginning of the possibility of joining the club. What it is it's not at all the traditional role. And again, having Donnie there and him to lean on is probably, you can ask for a better guy if you're me to be able to now join this club and have Donnie there, because he's a great guy just to bounce ideas off of and talk through things with. And obviously with his hitting acumen as well, it just adds to the offensive side of this thing. But, we've broken this thing down a little bit into the offensive side, the defensive side. I'll be really kind of overseeing the offensive side of things. Eric is the hitting coach, and I know Eric, I go back a long way with Dunk as well, and he's phenomenal. He's going to do a great job in the hitting coach role. I'm looking at it as the offense as a whole. So I'm looking completely on kind of the run production side. So we're talking about the hitting, the base running, and the different things that we're going to do in order to try to put the most runs on the board every night. We also have Trey Hillman, who's got obviously a incredible background in the game, and he's going to be helping Donnie a lot on the defensive side of this thing as a defensive coordinator. So in general, you look at the NFL's I look at how the NFL had this thing wired for years, and I feel like baseball was kind of moving in that direction anyway. When you look at the game, you look at run production and run prevention is essentially what you're trying to do. On one side of the ball, you're trying to score as many runs as possible. On the other side, you're trying to prevent them. And that's kind of the NFL setup with the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator. And yet you still have a head coach who at the end of the day is going to make the final call and the final decision. And that's where Donnie is. Donnie's going to make the final call and the final decisions as a manager of the club. But I think it gives him a chance to lean on me, and I'll be more locked in on the offensive side of everything going on. And then he can lean on Trey on the defensive side when those things are going on, and obviously still talk to Stott a lot about the pitching and how he's going to work with the pitching. So it is definitely a unique setup, but I feel like it's one that the game's moving towards, and I feel like we're ahead of the game and moving in the right direction.
We're going to lock in on offense with you here for the next few minutes today. The game has changed a lot since you broke into pro ball as an outfielder in the Mariners organization back in 1995. What's your sense in general of the state of offense in Major League Baseball in 2020? You hear so much talk about the three true outcomes. Everybody's hitting home runs, striking out, and walking. Fans say maybe that's not as enjoyable to watch. The home run part's fun to watch. But what's your thoughts in general on the state of offense in baseball right now?
I like the home run part. I'll tell you that much.
And the walks are okay too.
Absolutely. Again, I think the state of the game it's always changing, and it's pretty cool. You hear so many things now about, whether it's launch angle or whether it's home runs. There's so many arguments kind of moving around the game on old school, new school is the terminology. A friend of mine always says, and I use this term all the time. I'm not old school, new school, but I'm in school. And I think you have to constantly, be in that direction as a coach. I think the game is moving to a point where the athletes are a lot bigger, stronger, faster to some extent. There's a lot of strength in the game now where guys have the ability to drive the ball out of the ballpark consistently. So there are a set of guys that have that skill. But let me be clear. The guys that can put the ball in play, the guys that can draw the walk, the guys that get on base, and the guys that do those things, those guys are just as important when it comes to scoring runs and being a complete offense. So I don't think, in my opinion, there's not one side is not ahead of the other. At the end of the day, what the goal is to put the best group out there to provide the most runs. So the state of the game now is exciting because you do get to see balls leave the ballpark, and you do get to see that skill. And we're kind of, we're excited about that. So the fans get excited about that. Coaches get excited about that when you see those things happen. I think it's exciting to see. But it's even more exciting when you leave the ballpark and you won the game. And when you're winning ball games, that's more important than anything else. So I think, on an offensive side, there are things that are changing, but I don't think they're changing as much as kind of like we think they are. I do believe there's still plenty of players out there that provide, on base percentage, plenty of players out there that have good at bats, that draw their walks and do things that make true offenses. It makes the whole offense click, and that's what we're looking to do in Miami.
And I think it's worth noting, when you hit 307 home runs in Minnesota last year, most in a season in baseball history, your team was also the fourth hardest team to strike out in Major League Baseball. And those aren't two things you always see go hand in hand. How do you get to that point?
Honestly, and it goes back to what we talked about initially, kind of like, not thinking of all the situational hitting and all those things in the traditional sense. I mean, we talk about sending guys to home plate with the mindset of get a good pitch and hit the ball hard. We try to keep it really simple. Get a good pitch to hit the ball hard. So for me, it means, you're not trying to change in every situation. My goal is to go up there and hit the ball hard. If I get a pitch, I can drive. What you start finding out is when hitters are in an aggressive mentality or an aggressive mindset, and we talk about being aggressive, when guys stay aggressive, they know what they want to drive, and it's a little bit easier for them to lay off pitches that they can't drive. So you start seeing guys take a few more pitches that may be outside the strike zone, not because they have a great eye or not because, they saw that pitch so well. It was simply because that wasn't a ball that they could do damage with. And the mindset is to go up there and look for a pitch that you can do damage with. You get 3 shots at it, and pitchers make mistakes. They're not perfect, and we're looking to capitalize on the mistakes that they make, but we're looking to do that with an aggressive frame of mind at all times, looking to drive the ball. So I think some of the lack of strikeouts that were produced early on when you're talking in Minnesota, the guys that didn't strike out much but really drove the ball, it was because they weren't thinking about not striking out. They were thinking about driving the ball. And when balls didn't show up in the areas that we could drive them, they took them. And ultimately, that puts you in better counts to hit and puts you in a better situation to get a good pitch to drive on that next pitch.
It really is amazing listening to your thought process here, your philosophy, because it's a game that, at least from our end, right, on the broadcast, the media side of things, there's so many numbers and there's so many things and ways to tell the story, everything else. And we can make this game so darn complex all the time, right? And you're just saying, hey, if you see a pitch that you want to drive it. It doesn't get much simpler than that.
Absolutely. And honestly, Paul, you get to the point where you talk about that could be the first pitch or that could be the 10th pitch. I think sometimes we outthink ourselves here, and we'll see a guy swing at the first pitch, and sometimes there's a negative, connotation behind, oh, man, he didn't. Only thing I'm looking at on that pitch, whether you make it out or not, is was that a pitch you can drive? If you got a good pitch and you mishit it, hang with them. If we continue to do that over time, good things are going to happen with you. I don't want you to feel bad about swinging at a good pitch. If you mishit it, that may be timing, that may be small mechanics, that may be an issue that we can handle over time. No big deal. What we're looking at is making sure we stay in the zone. If you're swinging at pitches early in the count that are out of the zone or balls you can't drive, now we have to go back and ask ourselves some questions on what we're trying to do and how we're going to make adjustments and why are we doing those things. But I think as we analyze from our standpoint, when I'm analyzing what a hitter's doing, it's not strictly based off of whether the hitter got a hit or not. It's based off of his decision-making process. And when you see guys have a solid decision-making process over time, in our game, if you can do that consistently over time, there's a good chance that you're going to have a pretty productive season that year.
Right.
I worked with Tony Gwynn in San Diego for a long time, and Tony said there were nights he'd go 4 for 5 and go home not feeling very good about himself, not feeling great about the 5 at-bats. He'd go 1 for 5 and feel much better the next day because of the process and the contact he made and the at-bats that he had.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what it is. And we know what Tony Gwynn, we know at the end of the year what that looked like.
Right, exactly.
We get guys to stay in that zone and think that way. That's the way we're trying to do it, and really stay positive and enjoy the game. I don't think it's talked about enough how fun the game is and how fun it is and how fun hitting is. It's tough. It's the toughest thing to do in all sports, but I don't think there's anything more rewarding than when I see a guy work all day long and then finally get in that game and he gets that good pitch and he drives the ball and the look on his face. I don't care if you've been in this league for 2 days or for 8 years, the look is still the look. Guys enjoy and they laugh, and it's fun when you're able to go out there and put the work in and then have the success in the game. So I think it's fun, like when you can kind of take that process and you realize that, okay, the process is working and I saw results from all that work I'm putting in. You get excited, man. We're all kids at heart at this game, and guys get excited when things are going well.
At what point, as Glenn mentioned, you were a draft pick in 1994. At what point did you think of You know what? I think that there's a chance that at some point in my baseball career, I'm going to get into the coaching side of things. At what point was that?
Well, I think when I kept missing that curveball, it kind of set an alarm for me that it may not be hitting the curveball. I may be a little bit better at saying, do as I say, not as I do. but no, I think, for me, everything in general is always a challenge. I take everything as a challenge. I'm extremely competitive in a lot of modes. And I feel like, I always wanted to learn. So I started, as a player, hitting did not come easy to me. So it was something that I had to consistently, work at and learn. And I just started learning and talking to good hitters anytime I got a chance to, spending time with coaches, talking about the process. And I started to just kind of pick up how this worked over time. And I think it just became a passion of mine because it was exciting to be able to talk to players. When I started coaching at a young age, it was exciting to be able to talk to guys and see those guys succeed. I think sometimes I got more joy out of watching other guys get it and see them get there than I did, myself, which I didn't know that would be the case. But I think that was the first sign for me that maybe coaching was going to be for me, the ability to help somebody else achieve something and also be able to tell them the things that you went through, the tough times. I think, as you're going through this, when it's easy for you the whole time, it's kind of tough to sympathize with guys that are going through rough periods and understanding how hard the game is. I think myself, I understand how tough this is to hit. I understand that you can work really hard at it, and there's no magic wand. It's not just going to show up for you sometimes. And I think to be able to do that with players when they're going through rough patches as well helps. But early on, I don't think anyone knows they're going to coach when they're playing. I think when they're playing, you're still thinking about, I'm going to play and I'm going to get there. But the moment I stopped playing, the desire to kind of figure this thing out. I wasn't able to figure it out as a player, and I think I had a passion to continue to I have to figure out how to do this, and then I was able to be surrounded. I was blessed enough to be surrounded by really good people in the game that were willing to talk to me and teach me and go through those things, and then it just became a driving force for me.
You ever sit around now and think of all that you've learned, all the information you've accumulated, and say, I wish I could go back now and apply this on the field?
Yeah, you always think that, and it's funny because you hear that a lot, right? You go, well, man, if I would have known what I know now. But it's funny because there are a lot of us that think that, but sometimes you got to be realistic and say, there's some really talented players that made it to the big leagues. And those guys were going to make it to the big leagues, no matter what, and got there. So I never look back and think, man, if I would have known this, I would have made it. I kind of think that we all have a purpose. And I think like my purpose was not knowing it and taking the time to learn it, and now having an effect on hopefully helping that next generation of guys kind of learn those things. So if it was a matter of, not getting it then, but being able to gather all that information and then, enjoy watching these guys succeed and helping these guys achieve their dreams, it's pretty rewarding to be a part of guys being able to master their swing and do things at the major league level. It's pretty exciting.
Are there a handful of managers or coaches or hitters you've been around who were particularly influential to you?
Oh, man. Yeah, there are a lot of – I mean, I could go back and talk to a lot of guys. I would say probably for me the most influential, person in the game for me just coming up and through this is Gary Dimbo, who works in our organization now. But when I came up, I came to the Yankees as a player. I had been released by the Mariners. I went over to the Yankees in the minor league system. And, it was interesting because at that time, the Yankees, there was no real value in me in terms of they hadn't spent a whole lot of money. I was a released player coming to the organization. And what was really interesting to me was I had this desire to learn. And Gary Dimbo was the hitting coordinator at the time. And, Gary would work with you whether you were the first round pick or whether you were the last guy picked by the organization, free agent, whatever it was. He worked with you the same. And, he always spent his time and took time working with every player. He took a lot of time to work with me. And honestly, that's what started moving me toward the direction of coaching because I really appreciated that. I think everyone didn't do that. And I know everyone didn't do that. I watched other coaches and it wasn't the same, but there was something special about the pride he took. If you had a uniform on, you mattered. And he was going to work with you the same. And that's one of the things I try to carry with myself. And I've done that throughout my career is if you have a uniform on, you matter and you're a big part of this organization. It doesn't matter where you were picked, but you're part of the organization and we're all the same. So Gary was extremely influential in my coaching career. And I've always leaned on him throughout my time for advice and to talk hitting. And I'm not sure how much you guys know, but he's an incredible hitting coach and hitting guy as well, and has a lot of knowledge in that area. He stands out as is probably, one of the most influential for me amongst many others. I mean, they go into that.
Yeah, I know that your career has bounced you around to a few different spots. One of them being with the Chicago Cubs. Of course, they won a championship in 2016, ended that long drought. You weren't there that particular year, but you did work with a lot of those players that were part of that nucleus. And I guess in a sense, and we know that the Marlins are not at that championship point yet. The Cubs have won. The Marlins still want to win, but you can kind of see some of the similarities of that building of that group that's going to be that championship core. When you think back to the Cubs players that you worked with and the time that you put in spring training and building that up, and then even from a distance seeing them win the championship, what was the time like working with them, and how much pride did you take in them getting to the mountaintop in 2016?
Yeah, you go back, and that's exactly what the process was. I mean, it was process-oriented, like we talked about earlier. Having an opportunity to know at that time at the major leagues, when I got there, there was an understanding of at that time that the team wasn't obviously ready to win a world championship, but we were building. And, there were players that were coming along. Anthony Rizzo at the time was a player who had just actually come from San Diego, from his time in San Diego, and got back to Chicago, and was obviously one of the building blocks of that group and learning to do what he needed to do at the major league level. So there are a lot of similarities in the group. There are similarities and differences. One is just the mindset of building, I think, is the same. You know what you're trying to reach toward. You have a core group of players, and you're trying to take that core group to the next level. And if you're going to do it, they're going to have to do it together. That's what I see as absolutely being the same. The differences would simply just be the players themselves, obviously the different set of skills and those things that different players have that we talked about a little bit earlier. But I could take that time frame, what you're saying, and kind of share it. That's where I kind of feel like my strengths lie, and I've been able to do that because the Cubs were in that situation. I was fortunate even when I went to Minnesota, there was a lot of young talent there with that group of guys that hadn't quite gotten there yet, but we're still building. The Byron Buxtons, the Max Keplers, Miguel Sano's, and that group of guys. When I went back to New York in the development system, it's a lot of guys that are in the big leagues now, but that are still young players developing, the Judges, the Sanchez, and guys like that. That group of players, and now here in Miami, we have a very similar group of young, talented players that we can mention. So I'm comfortable with that group of guys. I'm comfortable in working with those guys. I'm excited about them because those guys bring a lot of energy to the ballpark every day, those style of players. The most important part of learning this is, again, getting to learn how each one of them tick. I think the success in Chicago was getting to know Anthony as a human being, Rizzo, and knowing how he did things. Same in Minnesota, same in New York, and it'll be the same in Miami. This is a human game first. It's all about building relationships, getting to know guys. And I'm really excited because we've gotten off to a really good start here with this group in Miami. And I've enjoyed even the conversations I've had with guys during this downtime, texting back and forth and talking to some guys throughout this process, getting to know them on a personal level is pretty cool too.
The Cubs tore it down when Theo took over and built it up. The Twins went from 78 wins 2 years ago to 101 last year, won the division, got to the playoffs with you there. How do you take that collection of young talent and turn good young players into a winning team?
I in my opinion, it's all about allowing these guys to kind of be themselves. It's funny. Young players have a tough time adjusting a lot of times at the major league level because there's a lot of things that are different. It's a big stage, and no matter who you are, there are nerves. There are nerves that happen. You're trying to do everything you can do to stay. And I think you forget sometimes about just playing the game that you've always played and enjoy playing the game. And I think the more comfortable players get initially at just playing the game, go out. And I think it's awesome from a coaching standpoint to help those guys relax faster. As quick as you can get those guys to relax and be themselves, the more you're going to see the best version of themselves come out. A lot of times young players are looking to find out, hey, what do you want me to do? They get to the big leagues and they just want to know, hey, what do you want me to do? Like, what am I supposed to do here? And the answer is, honestly, I want you to be yourself. I want you to go play the game. I don't want you to go out there and try to manufacture or try to do what I want you to do or try to, force something to happen. I want you to go out and have fun, play the game, play hard. And I think a big part of getting to that point and getting that athleticism to come out is getting them to relax. And if we can apply that to anything that we do in life, right? Anything that we do normally, the more relaxed we are, the more comfortable we feel, kind of the easier we do it, the slower the game becomes. And I think they talk about trying to slow the game down from an offensive standpoint. How do I slow it down? The guy's throwing really hard. How am I going to slow it down? Well, if everything's going too fast up here, you're speeding it up. But if you're able to take that deep breath, relax, know you're going to go up there with your set of skills, know you kind of know what you're trying to do up there, you have a plan at the plate, you can kind of slow this thing down naturally. And I think it's our job from a coaching side to keep things going slow. So when guys start going through rough patches, the job is sometimes is to make them laugh. They're gonna press. They're gonna think everything is going too fast. I'm not having a good time. Sometimes you got to make them laugh, make them slow down, so that they can see it's not as bad as they think it is. These guys are really good players. And the more relaxed and calm you keep them, the better off they're going to be. And that's been my experience. So it's been just being real with them. You tell them the truth when they're not playing well. Don't tell them they're playing well. They're not playing well. It's the truth. When they're playing good, you let them know. But it's not a punishment, or it's not one of those things where it's tough. You're just going out there to do your best every day, and you get those guys in that zone, and they know where you're coming from. You'd be amazed at how well they play when they're relaxed.
There's a lot of meat on the bone when it comes to the Marlins and the bats there, and I want to get into that in just a second. But I do want to ask you this. When the Twins came to Miami last year, as we always do, we chat with the other broadcasters, take the temperature of the opposition, especially a team like the Twins where the Marlins, we see them every 3 years or so. And I asked Dick Bramer, I said, where are all of these home runs coming from? And while he did give you and the coaching staff some credit, he also mentioned that the cement at Target Field was starting to dry. Have you heard any of that story and how that works? Or was he just completely fooling me and I fell for it, and now I'm asking you?
Well, I'm going to say he was fooling you, because I'm going to give the credit to the player. Again, I feel like the credit in that – I wouldn't give the credit to the cement more than I would.
But did you hear any of that though? That when the cement dried, it helped the ball carry more. Did you hear any of those rumors or whatever?
I've heard so many things. So to answer your question, yeah, I've heard that before. I mean, honestly, I haven't put much stock in it, but I have heard the story. But there are a few guys that were out there and performing at a high level, and I think those guys. Because there were some guys that tried to hit home runs with the cement drying and they couldn't get out of the ballpark. So I would definitely lean towards, just the players that we had. Those guys were phenomenal last year.
All right, good.
On a related note, before we get off this topic, what about the Marlins Park factor? We know the fences are coming in this year for the second time in the ballpark's history. Marlins Park seems to have gotten to the head of some hitters over the years, even some visiting hitters coming in for 3 days at a time. How do you look at this ballpark and how maybe you can even use it to your advantage?
I'll definitely tell you I'm not disappointed that the fences are coming in a little bit. That's a good thing. But I think what you have to do, and it's interesting because when you run into that, you're going to run into issues because your fences are what they are, right? Generally, unless they pull them in or whatever, once the season starts, that's out of your control. And I think you have to make sure from an offensive standpoint, again, you're focused in on what you do well. And you need players to lock in on that. So if you're a right-handed hitter and you can drive the ball the other way and drive it out of the park, great. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses. If that's not your strength, then take what the game gives you. Again, we're trying to score runs. And I think when hitters stay focused on taking what the game is going to give them, you're able to remove some of those things that you have no control over. Ballpark factors you don't have control over. So there are some parks that are really good for hitters. There are some parks that are even in some play, really bad for hitters. And, traditionally, I guess, the depths of Marlins Park has been tough for hitters. And you have visiting hitters that come in and go, I'm glad I don't have to play, half a season here because it'd be tough to drive balls out of the ballpark. But at the same time, that should have no effect on your ability to produce runs. And you have to make sure that your team is focused on the things they can control. And that's what we'll talk about this year. We're not going to there'll be no complaints about the ballpark. It'll be focused on what we can do and how we learn to use our ballpark for an advantage where other teams are coming in complaining. We'll have an advantage if we do things the right way.
Well, with this extra time, I think that the cement is dry on the wall supports out in center and right center field, so there's that. All right, so let's get into some specific players here. It's kind of an expanded game, I guess, of word association. So don't feel like you're limited to the first word that pops into your mind. But we want to run through some players that the Marlins certainly are going to count on in 2020 and many years in the future. I'll start with a guy like Brian Anderson in no particular order, but I'll start with Brian Anderson because he's the guy that you mentioned. Last year, he had a tremendous year. It was cut short by injury late, but you could start to see him taking that next step. And now with the added additions in the offense this year, you figure that's only going to accelerate. What about a guy like Brian Anderson? What did you see from him early on?
It's interesting because last year when we visited and I was with Minnesota, Brian was one of the players that kind of stood out to me. Looking through that, and he's got presence about him in the box. When I see him stand in the box, it's a guy who's got presence. He looks like he's got bad intentions when he's standing in there, and that's what you want to see. You want to see a guy at that size and with that ability to look to go up there to do damage, and he looks like that kind of player. When I got a chance to get to know him a little bit in spring training this year, I saw a guy that was intense, and I like that. He's intense. He has high expectations for himself. He wants to play well. He expects himself to play well, so he'll be a little tough on himself at times, but it comes from a place of wanting to succeed and wanting to help the team, and I like that about guys who want to go out that way. So his talent for me speaks for itself. I mean, big, strong guy who can drive the ball to all fields, and that's one of the things I saw in spring training, his ability to drive the ball to all fields in his work and what he was doing as he was just trying to get to that regular season form, but you could see it starting to come at the end there where his ability to use the entire field to drive the ball is going to be something that's going to be dangerous, for the opposition and really helpful for us as a team where you have a guy in his position that can do those kind of things offensively.
I think his first big league home run a couple of years ago was right down the right field line against the Red Sox in an early season game in Miami. You had Max Kepler, who went from 17 home runs to 19 to 20 to 36 all of a sudden. You had Sano go off for 34 last year in 105 games. Is Anderson the kind of guy who you think has that kind of room for growth moving forward? Here's the one thing I always say: sky's the limit. Like, I never put a ceiling on top of guys, and I'm very cautious to ever draw comparisons because I think every guy needs to be themselves, like we talked about. But when I see what Brian's able to do and I watch him play, I can definitely see that he is definitely not at his ceiling. There's a lot of room for him to grow as a player. And that's what's exciting because you're going to continue to watch this guy grow and see what he can turn into. And again, as he becomes more comfortable, one thing to me is, as you start seeing the same pitching over and over again, you start building this library in your head of how you take approaches against different pitchers. Obviously, in the division that Brian's played in, there's some tough pitching. He's going out there every night and facing some of the toughest pitchers in the game. So if you even look at some things comparatively, you compare his potential numbers against a player that may not be playing against that caliber of pitching every night. The numbers may not be the same, but the skill set can actually be better of a player who's having to face tough pitchers every night. So all those things go into account when I think about him, and he's definitely got a lot of room to grow. He's not close to the player that I think he can be as he continues to, grow in the league. There's going to be some really big numbers that come out of his bat.
I think another player that fits the last statement that you just said, a lot of room to grow and is not yet the player that he will then become, is Jorge Alfaro. Of course, he's a guy that was brought over from the Phillies for JT Realmuto. I think if you ask including Marlins folks, they would say he is on a short list of best catchers in baseball, and that's why the Marlins waited so long to try to make the right deal when that deal obviously needed to be made. And when they brought in Jorge Alfaro, you could see some of that same skill set, whether it was the similar speed that JT Realmuto had, arm strength from behind the plate, hitting ability, and that's obviously where I want to go with Alfaro right now. A lot of swing and miss, right? Last year, I'm sure that's something that you guys are focused on cleaning up a little bit, but when he makes contact with the ball, it goes a mile, and especially to the opposite field. What's your take on Alfaro?
Absolutely. So this offseason, I went to Jupiter and I saw some workouts, and it was either the second or third ball, I can't remember, but he hit a ball and it almost it felt like it was going to knock down the batter's eye. He hit this ball, and I just sat there and said, wow. My first thought on that was wow, because that the impact that he can hit a baseball with it's without a doubt amongst the best in the game, just in terms of the impact in which he can hit a baseball with. So I was really excited. And again, you can see that on video, but there's nothing like hearing that sound live. And seeing him do that live, it changes the game for you. And I got a chance to watch him do that. Again, you hit it right on the head. The first and foremost is the ability he has to drive the ball out of the ballpark the other way. So he can use all fields. I think he's going to continue to grow as well. It's one thing when you have power, then it becomes how do I use that power consistently? And how do I have a game plan in order to use that power? I think a lot of things with Georgie, as I talk to him and listen to him this spring training, it's pretty interesting because he's growing and he's learning. There's a lot that people look at the coaches and wonder how much the coaches are teaching the players. But I honestly feel like as you start to build relationships and talk to players, they're going to teach you a lot more too. And, you just wonder if a guy is working on the right path. I can tell he understands he has power. There are things he wants to do with the game that we'll see happen this year. Like you talked about, the swing and miss is something that happens, but that just comes from, consistently seeing guys. It also comes from learning an approach, learning what you want to do at the plate, slowing the game down. There are different things you can do to help you gain the ability to have better pitch selection at home plate. There's no doubt in my mind that this is a player that will be able to do that. It was interesting. I saw what he was able to do and looked at some of the numbers toward the end of last year, and it looked like he started to make some of those adjustments as a player. It looks like he started to come into his own a little bit as the year went on and did that. So he's another guy. I think he's going to grow. He's going to continue to get better. But his power, again, like this is one of the guys where you legitimately start talking about, there's a power potential there that's to be amongst the top, 2 or 3 players maybe in all of baseball. So I think
you were talking.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, finish up. Go ahead. I thought you were not.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just think to the key to getting him to get there is to work with him on getting there at his pace. And again, not to hear the outside noise and not try to think I got power, so I have to go up there and use power, show them I have power. But it's, I'm going to continue to show these guys that I'm continuing to learn my swing. I'm continuing to learn what pitches I drive. I'm continuing to learn what counts and things like that happen when I'm able to do damage. As those things happen, you're going to see him start to flourish as a player overall.
You were talking a little while ago about young players getting to the big leagues and looking around and saying, okay, what do I do now? What do you need me to do? We saw Isan Diaz have a monster year in AAA last year, then come up. He hit the home run off DeGrom in his debut. But after that, it was a real struggle for a young player who had put up huge numbers in the Pacific Coast League. What did you see from Isan this spring? Does he seem a little bit more comfortable now the second time around?
So it's interesting because I didn't see, this would be my first year seeing him. When I saw Isan Diaz, I'm probably about as high on Isan Diaz as I am any young player I've seen.
Wow.
I'm incredibly excited about this kid. This kid works really hard. Humble kid, comes to work every day. When I watched him in the offseason and what he did, and he's got a desire to learn. He wants to get better. He knows he's a good player. He knows he has that opportunity to be a good player. But he also has that thing in him when I watch him that he wants to get better and he wants to learn and he really wants to dominate. When I watch his skill set, I go, this is a guy who's got balance. He can drive the ball. He's got a pretty swing. I mean, his swing works really nice. I mean, you look at the swing, and I go, there's nothing wrong. That swing plays. There are guys that play in the major league level and that don't have the swing that he has, the fluidity, the easiness, the loose hands, all the things. He can control the barrel. He does a lot of things really well. I think it's going to be continuing with him to get him to kind of what we talked about earlier. The faster he can relax, the faster he can be comfortable in his own skin and go out there and just go out there to put 4 quality at-bats together every night. Not focus on the results every night that I have to get 4 hits. But if I go up there and I have 4 good at-bats, I have a good plan of what I'm trying to do, I feel good, start gauging how you feel as a hitter. There are things that he's going to do more on the mental side of the game over the next few years that are going to continue to let those physical skills flourish. But this kid has an incredible ceiling, if you ask me. One of the prettiest swings I've seen on a young player in a long time.
Let's keep that theme going of bats that the Marlins have acquired the last few years. Obviously, we talked about Alfaro and Isan Diaz, a guy that you know pretty well, even going back a couple of years, Lewin Diaz, who was brought over last year right around the trade deadline from Minnesota. What's your take on where Lewin Diaz is or can go?
First thing I would tell opposing outfield is to back up. This kid is again, that's a special talent. I mean, you watch him and his ability to hit a baseball. It reminds you of some of the bigger power hitters in the game, and you see that, and it's exciting to watch. But this kid really deserves a lot of credit because his years in Minnesota, I'm not sure how many people know, but he made a lot of changes to his swing. He made a lot of adjustments that last year, and then to be able to see what he did when he came over to the Marlins organization and stick with that and continue to even take it further and grow even more in his swing, is a credit to him and the coaches that he's worked with over time. But, the changes he made just really opened up his ability to get the ball in the air consistently with backspin. And, he made some adjustments, and now you see him, he gets the ball in the air to all parts of the field with backspin. So he has the ability to mishit the ball and hit it out of the ballpark because of his strength. So he's a guy who doesn't have to get it all in order to drive it out, which again is a really good skill if you're a player in that ability. I mean, a player with that ability, because it changes the game for you. The best power hitters in the game, that's what they do. It's not that they hit every ball perfect. Obviously, we see them mishit balls and they leave the park. Lewin Diaz is that type of guy, and really, really bright future. But more than that, what excited me about him was watching him. His smile and his energy is infectious. He shows up and he enjoys playing the game. He has fun. So you can tell this guy's a good teammate. Guys like to joke around and be around him. And that's a big part when it comes to being a championship caliber organization and a championship caliber team is what's the chemistry like? Are the guys going to fight for each other? Are the guys going to pull for each other? Is everybody going to go in one direction? And that one direction is without a doubt to win a world championship. And I think as, those guys pull together and do that, you're going to see that. And Lewin is, he's kind of embodies that a little bit because I watch the way teammates rally around him a little bit. It was pretty fun seeing a young guy have that kind of energy in spring training.
He looked like he could play some first base, too, when we saw him this spring, for a big guy especially.
Absolutely. He was over there, and he looked really good around the back, too. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm calling the offensive side out right now, but I was more excited at the balls going over the wall.
No doubt. So are we. But a good glove at first base is nice, too.
Absolutely. You got to have that right to win. You need to be a complete player. And I think that this is – and that's one thing we stress and we talk about a lot, is being a complete player, taking both sides of it, just as seriously because it helps us. Obviously, in the league we play in, it's awesome to have complete players out there on the field every day.
Another guy the Marlins would just love to get him to break out of his shell. He's a very introverted guy. He's Jazz Chisholm. Very low energy, very, very low energy. What's your take on Jazz? I mean, in all honesty, for those that may not know, he is a riot, and he does 5-hour energy. If they're not sponsoring him yet, they should.
Here's what I love about Jazz. I mean, in one word, it's confidence. It's confidence. You have to be confident in order to play this game at the highest level. And to be able to maintain it, there has to be a level of confidence. And Jazz works hard. He shows up every day. He showed up in spring training. He was out there early every day in the cages, every single day out there early hitting, going through his routine, working on his craft. He asks a lot of questions. You watch this kid and you see incredible athleticism. Again, maybe one of the best athletes that we have in the game right now. Like you just watch his athleticism and it's ridiculous. Really loose hands. And you see the frame and you look at the guy and he's not a big guy, but he can hit the ball a long way because he has incredibly quick hands, quick wrist, and he's another one who has the ability to use the entire field. And I think it's a credit to the organization as a whole for going out there and looking for athletes of that caliber, and making the move to bring in a player like that who first and foremost is just a phenomenal athlete, and he can play and do anything you ask him to do. But his energy, like you said, is unmatched. Again, honestly, his confidence, he believes in himself. And those are the type of players that you want, because when it gets tough up here and you're facing, some of those tough pitchers out there, you're going through a moment where you need somebody who's going to dig in and have to have one of those moments. You want to know that the guy at the plate believes in himself. The guy at the plate believes he can do the job. And so I don't think you move a whole lot in this game without confidence. And again, I think Jazz is also a guy who can kind of rib his teammates a little bit, and whether you're getting on him or whether you're doing whatever, it becomes fun, and he can bring a lot of fun and energy around the group as well.
Speaking of athletes, a couple of months ago we were in Jupiter. Marlins fans were wondering about Lewis Brinson and this being a big spring and a big year for Lewis. It looked to us, after watching the last couple of years, as though there had been some progress made with the results he was having early this spring. What did you see from Brinson, who, as we know, has a lot of hype around him, has put up a lot of numbers in AAA, but it hasn't carried over so far in the big leagues?
I tell you what, it was really, really, I was really excited to get to know him. To be honest with you, just talking to him and getting to know him as a person and talking through it. I mean, what a great person he is. What a great dude he is, and those it's easy to root for guys like that. I mean,
we say that all the time with him. You root like heck for him. You see the work ethic, the desire. No matter how badly things have gone, he's fought through it. He's shown up. He's put in the work every day for 2 years now.
Absolutely. And when I saw him this offseason, he was already working, and he looked really good. And he deserves a lot of, he deserves all the credit, to be honest. He went out there this offseason and he worked at his craft. He did what he needed to do and continued to work at it, made some adjustments. And he, what we saw in spring training was just a culmination of the work that he put in. And, when you see that, it's exciting because he deserves the credit. It was fun to see him have those results in spring training and feel good about it. I thought his swing, just from looking at his swing in video that I saw, and then I saw the swing that he put together in spring training, there were obviously, some adjustments that he had made to the swing, and he was able to take them into actual game action, which was awesome to see. This kid he's a smart kid. He's continuing to learn the game. I think he's starting to learn, how pitchers are going to approach him, the things he needs to do. Sometimes the greatest teacher, and always I say the greatest teacher in this game is experience. And there's no other way around it. You have to go through some of the lumps and go through some of the tough times in this game. And if you make it through, you're a lot better for it on the other end. And it's nice when that curve is really short. Some guys are going to come up and that curve is going to be shorter. And some guys, it takes a little longer. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how long it takes, as long as you're able to get to that point where you can contribute, help the team, and then use that to your advantage for the remainder of your career. I honestly feel that watching him in this spring, I'm excited for him for the season. I'd like him to stay in that same zone, not to try to do too much or not to try to impress anybody, but just go out there and, again, be the best version of himself, that he can be every night. Go out there and be the best Lewis Brinson that there is every single night. And I would bet anything that that's going to be a really good player and an above-average player in this league.
Geff and I both have probably about 10 or 12 more players on the list, but we know that you've got to run, so we're not going to get to all of those now. It just means that you have to talk to us again at some point, unfortunately. But two quick things. We have our hit and run segment, which we'll get to in just a second. Those are 5 quick hitters. But there's a fan question as well. Geff, I think you've got that one, right?
Well, we got a question from a very devoted viewer, Vicente, who actually watches from Spain. He's a big Marlins fan in Spain. And he wanted to know if you have managerial aspirations. I know you just got here. You're the bench coach now, the offensive coordinator. But do you have managerial aspirations down the road?
No, I stay focused on the task at hand. Like, that's my mindset. My mindset is we're here now, and I'm in the bench coach, offensive coordinator role here to do what I can do to help the club win. I think when you stay focused on the task at hand and everything we do, I think when you stay focused on the task at hand, things later can open up, may or may not open up in terms of what you decide to do, but I don't think you can get too far ahead of yourself in anything. We always tell players to stay in the moment. As a coach, the job is to stay in the moment. So I stay in the moment every day. And I know it sounds a little cliche-ish, but in all honesty, that's the approach that I take. It's do the job that you're doing right now, stay focused on that job, and when that's done, you worry about the rest later. And right now, the goal is to win a world championship with the Marlins as the offensive coordinator and bench coach.
I've got one more for you from David on Twitter. He wanted to know about your use of analytics in hitting and what numbers matter the most to you.
For me, it's interesting because I definitely look at the numbers. I think the numbers matter. I think you have to look at them, but I think you use them differently. I don't think you use the numbers as a gauge to tell a player they need to achieve a specific number. I think it helps you in order to design a plan to help a player get to a point where he can do something more consistently. So it can help a coach guide a plan. I think one of the things I look at a lot is just the consistency of how hard you hit the ball. So the hard hit and the balls that are hit hard is something that comes off, because if you're hitting the ball hard consistently, that's a big deal. That means you're getting the good part of the bat on the ball consistently, and you work from there. So hard hit percentage to keep it simple would be one of the things that I like to kind of stay focused on, making sure guys are hitting the ball off the right part of the bat consistently.
All right. Great minds think alike. It's time now for our hit and run segment. So these are 5 quick hitters. Just a couple of words. Don't feel like you got to go nuts on these. But 5 quick hitters, and then we let you run. You've been on a deserted island for 6 months. For 6 months, okay? And now you need to know today how good a player is. What stat do you look at?
Oh, man. I would say from an offensive standpoint, again, his hard hit percentage.
Okay.
If he hits the ball hard, I'm in.
All right. Same scenario. What's the least telling stat? Maybe something that we throw around an awful lot, and it's not all it's cracked up to be.
I would say that'd be batting average, probably.
Okay. Throughout your career, I know you've bounced around a little bit. Favorite baseball city to either live in or to play in?
I have to be on Minnesota so far. Minnesota for me it was phenomenal. A really, really solid 3 years.
Okay. Ballpark that you hated playing in?
Oakland.
A lot of foul territory.
Yeah, Oakland.
We'll make it out of a trip to Oakland this year. We were supposed to go.
Among teams that you've coached, who's put on the best show in batting practice?
The 2019 Bomba Squad.
I guess it started with a layup and it ended with a layup. James, we appreciate the time, man. This was excellent to have an extended conversation with you, one that, because you're so busy in Jupiter, we wouldn't normally get to have. So, again, looking at the silver lining here, we appreciate the time, man. Talk to you soon.
Thank you guys for having me, and stay safe out there. Stay healthy, guys.
All right, will do. Thank you.
James.
All right. Again, excellent perspective, Geff. Someone who is going to mean an awful lot to this organization in 2020 going forward.
It was a lot of fun. You think about all that we've gotten bogged down and talking about over the last couple of months related to what's going on in the world. It's fun to turn the clock back and have some of the conversations we were having at Jupiter and asking about Lewis Brinson and Isan Diaz and Brian Anderson and things like that and hitting philosophies and bringing this young talent together. So you can see he was talking about the energy level of Jazz Chisholm's people. James Rowson brings a lot of energy to the table. And this is a really nice staff. If you look at the way it's evolved in recent years under Don Mattingly, they work collectively very well. You talk about an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator bringing people together to collaborate on things. When we talk about this Marlins team, no matter what the record has been the last couple of years, playing hard night in and night out, not being a fun team to play for the opposition night in and night out, I think credit needs to go to Don Mattingly and to the members of this coaching staff. And you see James Rowson would be a great fit.
Right. And he gave a lot of credit, too, to a guy that on the outside even starting to get some love, too, as the potential to be a terrific hitting coach, and Eric Duncan, who was promoted to that head hitting coach spot for 2020. Again, a couple of things to remind you of. First of all, we have our question of the day. I know that Geff brought that up earlier. Do you have the current numbers? Are you still pulling those up? While you pull those up, I'll remind folks that we have some exciting news around the Home Run Rewards program. You can unlock new prizes and experiences throughout May. Enter the bonus code NEWS, N-E-W-S, to earn extra reward points today. Visit marlins.com/rewards to get more updates. So there is that as well. We have the results. These are hot off the presses, right?
The percentages haven't moved a whole lot. Our question today: your favorite team wins the 2020 World Series after an 82-game regular season with expanded playoffs. Your level of excitement will be: my life is complete is up to 55%. Looks like that's going to be our winner. Fired up, but with an asterisk, is at 29%. And Wake Me Up in 2021 is holding steady at 16%. So even with an abbreviated season this year, you go out, you win the World Series, your fans say we can't wait for the parade.
You know what I think? And not that you asked me, but I'm going to chime in anyway. I looked at it in two different ways. I think if you just look at it as an 82-game sprint as opposed to the 162-game marathon, yeah, maybe there's a little bit of shine that comes off of that. But if you think of the expanded postseason, right? We think back to teams in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the Yankees winning 5 straight World Series back in the day. Well, you win the pennant.
You have to win the World Series.
Right. It's one series. Now you might be going through 3-4 series to win it all. So I think that in some way that might even things out. And again, whatever team is holding the Commissioner's Trophy at the end of the year, they and their fan base will be happy. And whoever fell on the other 45% of the wake me up next year or there's an asterisk, they'll all be in that other side where it's fantastic for them, I'm sure. Geff, that was terrific today. Again, our thanks to the Marlins and James Rowson for hooking that up. He was fantastic. Again, great perspective on a guy that's going to be very important to the Marlins' success in 2020 and beyond.
Let's hope he and we and everybody's back on the field very soon here, and we can go to work.
Right, absolutely. In the meantime, this is what we call work, and we'll work on getting another guest. We'll have one coming up, and we'll make those announcements. Thanks again to following us on Twitter and Facebook and watching the program. Again, always go to our YouTube channel to see all kinds of stuff. Another thing, too, hopefully you have the time to watch it all. If not, we've been kind of bookmarking the segments of our show as well to make it just a little bit easier and basically taking away every excuse for you not to watch our programs. All right, Geff, it's been a pleasure, buddy. I'll talk to you soon, man. Have a great weekend.
Great stuff. Thanks, Paul.